Shattered by the tragic loss of her love, and with a life-altering secret blossoming within her, she was a humiliated waitress, meticulously concealing her pregnancy. He, a cold, calculating billionaire, consumed by a burning thirst for vengeance against her father, sought her out and presented a dark, unthinkable proposition, a marriage of convenience in exchange for her family's salvation. But this forced union would inevitably unravel a past rife with betrayal, lies, and expose a lurking enemy, willing to kill, to protect long-buried secrets. Brace yourself for a shocking revelation that will redefine family, love, and forgiveness. This is a saga you won't want to miss, a narrative that will keep you guessing until the very end. Helena Knight adjusted the simple black dress in the mirror of the charming, albeit slightly cramped apartment in a historic brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, where she now lived with her parents since they'd lost their sprawling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. The bills piled up on the kitchen table, each crimson envelope a cruel reminder of how her family had plummeted from the heights of New York's elite society to the suffocating reality of insurmountable debt. "Honey, are you sure about this?" Her mother, Beatrice's trembling voice, echoed from the next room. Helena knew the question wasn't just about the waitressing job she'd landed at the exclusive Grand Astoria Hotel, but about all the grim choices circumstances were forcing them to make. "Mom, we don't have a choice," Helena replied, unconsciously touching her still flat stomach. The secret she carried weighed more heavily than any debt. Lucas had been dead for 3 months, a victim of a tragic accident on the notoriously congested I-95 corridor just outside the city, and with him had died not only her first love, but also her dreams of a normal life. Now, all that mattered was protecting the baby growing inside her and finding a way to save her family from utter ruin. The hotel buzzed with energy that Saturday night. Helena served French champagne and canapes to guests at the launch party for a new investment firm, moving discreetly among business moguls and socialites who had once been intimate friends of her family. Some recognized her, others feigned ignorance. The humiliation stung, but she maintained her professional smile. Across the ballroom, Daniel Volkov observed every movement of the party with calculating eyes. At 37, he had built a global financial empire with significant holdings across the Americas. But his presence in New York had a very specific purpose. Dressed in an impeccable Italian suit, he radiated power and control, every gesture measured, every word deliberate. Mr. Volkov, Miguel Santos, his attorney and right-hand man, approached him. "The Knight family is indeed in a desperate situation. The patriarch, Robert Knight, owes over 50 million. Their construction firm has already been seized." Daniel nodded, savoring the information like a rare vintage. Robert Knight, the man he held responsible for the destruction of his own family 15 years ago, when the Volkovs were still just a middle-class family in Chicago, dreaming of striking it rich through ill-fated real estate ventures. The fraud orchestrated by Knight had driven his father to bankruptcy and subsequently to a massive heart attack that killed him. "And the daughters?" Daniel asked, his fingers tapping on the marble counter. "Helena, the elder, is working here at the hotel. The younger one is studying medicine, but we're unsure how long she'll be able to keep up with tuition." Just then, Helena passed by them carrying a tray, and Daniel observed her with renewed interest. She was exactly as he'd imagined Robert Knight's daughter would be. Refined even in adversity, beautiful in an almost ethereal way, but with something in her eyes that suggested profound sorrow. Perfect for his plans. "Helena Knight," he murmured, and she paused, recognizing her own name. "Yes, sir." She turned, and Daniel saw up close the green eyes that seemed to hold countless secrets. "Daniel Volkov, could you bring me a glass of whiskey? Macallan 18, if available." Helena nodded and headed towards the bar, but her hands trembled slightly. There was something in that man's gaze that made her uneasy, as if he could see through her carefully constructed defenses. "You're Robert Knight's daughter, aren't you?" Daniel asked when she returned with the drink, his voice soft but with a tone she couldn't quite decipher. "I am," she replied, lifting her chin with dignity. "How can I help you?" Daniel smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps I'm the one who can help you. I have a business proposition for your family." Helena felt her heart quicken. A business proposition from one of the most powerful men in the country could mean the salvation they so desperately needed. But her intuition warned her that nothing in life was ever that simple. "What kind of proposition?" she asked, aware that other servers needed her attention, but unable to pull herself away. "The kind that resolves all your financial woes," Daniel replied, sipping his whiskey without taking his eyes off her. "But I believe this conversation would be more appropriate in a more private setting. Would you be willing to have dinner with me tomorrow, to discuss the details?" Helena hesitated. Every instinct screamed for her to decline, but the image of the piled-up bills at home and her parents' silent desperation compelled her to agree. "Where?" she asked. "I'll pick you up at your place at 8. And Helena—" He paused, placing a hand on her arm for a fleeting moment. "Bring your father. He'll want to hear what I have to say about the future of the Knight family." Aurelia, nestled in the heart of Tribeca, was exactly the kind of place Helena used to dine when her family still commanded respect. Now, seated at the table reserved by Daniel Volkov, she felt like an imposter in her own lost world. Her father, Robert Knight, nervously adjusted his tie, which no longer quite matched the refined elegance of their surroundings. "Mr. Knight," Daniel greeted the elder man with a cordiality that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's an honor to finally meet you in person." Robert shook the offered hand, not quite registering the grip that was subtly firmer than necessary. Helena observed the interaction, noting how Daniel seemed to study her father's every reaction, like a predator assessing its prey. "Mr. Volkov, I must admit I'm quite curious about your proposition," Robert said, attempting to maintain his dignity, even as he knew his financial woes were no secret to anyone in their business circles. Daniel smiled, elegantly cutting a piece of salmon. "Straight to the point. I admire that." He turned to Helena, who had barely touched her appetizer. "In truth, my proposition is quite simple. I want to clear all of the Knight family's debts." Robert dropped his fork, and Helena felt her heart race. "In exchange for what?" she asked, her voice firmer than she expected. "In exchange for a marriage," Daniel replied calmly, as if discussing the weather. "To me." Helena recoiled in her chair as if she'd been slapped. I'm sorry. A marriage of convenience, of course," Daniel continued, ignoring her shocked expression. "I need a wife for some business I intend to expand here. You need financial stability for your family. It's a transaction that benefits both sides." Robert leaned forward, and Helena watched in horror as her father's eyes gleamed with desperate hope. "What kind of arrangement exactly?" "Dad?" "No," Helena murmured, but her voice was drowned out by Daniel's explanation. "A year-long marriage. Helena would maintain her own apartment, her freedom. She would merely attend social and business events by my side when necessary. In return, all of the Knight family's debts would be cleared, and I would also provide a generous monthly income." Helena stood abruptly. "Excuse me, I need some air." She walked out onto the restaurant's terrace, her hands trembling as she gripped the railing. The crisp night air of Tribeca couldn't calm the whirlwind of emotions consuming her. How dared he turn her into a commodity? And how could her father even consider the proposition? "Breathing better?" Daniel's voice from behind her made her turn. You can't be serious." "I am completely serious." He approached, and Helena involuntarily noticed how his dark suit accentuated his broad shoulders, how his dark eyes seemed to see right through her. He was a devastatingly attractive man, which made the situation even more unsettling. "Why me?" she asked. "There are hundreds of women who would accept your proposal without hesitation." Daniel was silent for a long moment, studying her. "Because you have something others don't." "What?" "True class. Even losing everything, you haven't lost your dignity." He paused. "And because you need me as much as I need you, I don't need anyone," Helena replied, lifting her chin. "Don't you?" Daniel took another step closer. "Your family is 3 months away from losing even that small apartment in Brooklyn Heights. Your mother is on anxiety medication that you can barely afford. And you—" He hesitated, as if about to say something more, but restrained himself. "You're working 3 different jobs, trying to hold things together." Helena felt tears sting her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "And what do you gain from this? I don't believe it's merely a business matter." For an instant, something flickered across Daniel's face, a shadow of genuine emotion that vanished so quickly she thought she'd imagined it. "We all have our motivations, Helena. Mine are none of your concern. If I'm going to marry you, even if it's a sham, then they absolutely are my concern." Daniel laughed, but the sound was devoid of humor. Marriage isn't about understanding each other's motivations. It's about mutual advantage. That's cynical even for a businessman, and you're too romantic for someone who's lost everything. The words cut deep, especially because Helena knew she had lost much more than Daniel could imagine. Lucas, the baby secretly growing inside her, the life she'd dreamed of having. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course, but Helena—" He gently took her arm when she tried to pass him. The touch sent an involuntary jolt through her. "Time is a luxury your family doesn't have. Creditors won't wait for your romantic feelings." Back at the table, Robert was visibly agitated. "Helena, honey, we need to seriously consider this. It's a unique opportunity." "It's emotional blackmail," Helena retorted, but her voice didn't carry the conviction it had before. Daniel summoned the waiter and asked for the check. "I'll give you 3 days to decide. After that, I withdraw the offer and find another solution for my business." As he stood to leave, he placed a card on the table. "My personal number. When you decide you want to save your family, call me." Helena looked at the card as if it were a venomous snake. "And if I refuse?" Daniel was already putting on his jacket. "Then good luck explaining to your mother why you chose pride over her survival." After he left, Robert picked up the card with trembling hands. "Helena, sweetie, maybe—" "No, Dad, we're not discussing this here." But even as she protested, Helena knew that Daniel Volkov had calculated every word, every moment. He had cast the hook perfectly, and she could feel herself being pulled into waters from which she might never escape. That night, in her small, stifled room, Helena placed her hand over her belly and whispered a silent prayer. 3 days. In 3 days, she would have to choose between saving her family and protecting the secret that could destroy everything. Helena accepted the proposal in a 30-second call 3 days later, when marshals knocked on their apartment door with an eviction order. Her voice trembled only once when she said, "I accept," and Daniel responded with a simple, "We'll be married on Friday," before hanging up. The City Hall ceremony was a chilling farce. Helena wore a simple white dress she'd bought in haste, while Daniel appeared impeccable in his dark suit, treating the event as just another business meeting. The only witnesses were Miguel Santos and a secretary Daniel brought along. Helena's parents weren't even invited. She couldn't bear to see the desperate gratitude in their eyes. "Now you are my wife," Daniel murmured in her ear as they signed the papers, and Helena felt a shiver she wasn't sure was from fear or something more dangerous. The forced honeymoon took place at a secluded estate in the Hamptons, Daniel's private property with ocean views and surrounded by lush greenery that made her feel simultaneously in paradise and in a prison. The house was luxurious but cold, decorated with modern furniture and contemporary art that revealed nothing about her new husband's personality. "Your room is down there," Daniel indicated a suite at the end of the hallway on the first day. "Mine is upstairs. There's no need for unnecessary proximity." Helena nodded, relieved and yet strangely insulted by his coldness. During the silent meals on the Ocean View Terrace, she subtly observed him, trying to decipher the man behind the controlled facade. It was on the third morning that the first sign that something was wrong became too obvious to ignore. Helena rushed to the bathroom in the middle of breakfast, vomiting violently, while Daniel watched from the doorway with an indecipherable expression. "Something you ate last night?" he asked in a neutral voice, but Helena noticed how his eyes narrowed, calculating. "Must be the nerves from all this arrangement," she lied, rinsing her mouth with cold water. But Daniel was no fool, and Helena realized he began to observe her more closely. He noticed when she refused the wine he offered at dinner, when she pushed certain dishes around her plate, when her clothes seemed slightly tighter around her waist. "You're hiding something from me," he said one afternoon as they walked along the beach. It wasn't a question. Helena felt her heart race. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Helena." He stopped walking and turned to her, holding her shoulders firmly. "We're married now, even if it's just on paper. Don't take me for a fool." For a moment, looking into those dark eyes that seemed to see right through her, Helena considered telling the truth. There was something in the intensity of his gaze that made her want to confess everything. About Lucas, about the baby, about the consuming fear. "We all have our secrets," she said finally, echoing the words he had used with her at the restaurant. "They're none of your concern." Daniel chuckled, but the sound was dry. "Touché." He released her shoulders and resumed walking. "But unlike you, I don't pretend my secrets don't affect our arrangement." "What does that mean?" Daniel was silent for a long moment, watching the waves. "It means I didn't marry you by chance, Helena. Your family, your father, he's not the honest man you believe him to be." Helena stopped walking. "What do you mean?" "Robert Knight destroyed my family 15 years ago. A real estate fraud that led my parents to bankruptcy and my father to his death." Daniel's voice was controlled, but Helena could feel the contained rage beneath the surface. "Every dollar he owes today is nothing compared to what he took from us." The world seemed to tilt beneath Helena's feet. That's not true. My father would never..." "Never what? Never stole? Never lied?" Daniel turned to her, and for the first time she saw the mask of civility slip completely. "Why do you think I agreed to pay his debt so easily?" "Out of pure kindness," Helena recoiled, instinctively placing a hand on her stomach. You're getting revenge. On me." "On the entire Knight family," he confirmed without remorse. "You were just an unexpected bonus." The tears Helena had managed to hold back for days finally overflowed. "I should have known. Men like you don't do anything out of kindness, and women like you don't marry strangers unless they're desperate," Daniel retorted. But there was something in his voice that suggested her tears affected him more than he'd like to admit. "You know nothing about women like me," Helena said, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "I know you're pregnant." The words dropped between them like a bomb. Helena paled, and Daniel saw the confirmation he was looking for in the terror that flashed across her eyes. She began, but couldn't form the words. "How many months?" His voice was dangerously low. Helena lifted her chin, finding a courage she didn't know she possessed. "That's none of your concern. You're carrying another man's child, and it's none of my concern." Daniel took a step toward her, radiating a cold fury. "You married me pregnant with another man's child. You married me to get revenge on my father," Helena yelled back. "Don't pretend you have any moral high ground here." They stood there, in the middle of the deserted beach, each revealing the cards they had so carefully hidden. The sound of the waves seemed deafening in the silence that followed. "Who is the father?" Daniel asked finally, his voice returning to the controlled tone she was used to. Helena closed her eyes. "Someone who's dead." The answer seemed to drain some of his anger. "Dead how?" "Car accident. 3 months ago." Her voice was barely a whisper. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly weary. "That's why you agreed to marry me. It wasn't just for the money. It was for the baby," Helena admitted. "I needed protection, stability. I couldn't raise a child alone. without resources. They stood there, two strangers united by a marriage based on lies and desperate needs, each carrying secrets that could destroy any chance of what? Helena didn't know anymore. "Let's go back to the house," Daniel said finally. "We need to talk about what this means for our arrangement." As they walked back across the sand, Helena couldn't help but wonder if she had just sealed her fate or finally found someone who understood the weight of carrying impossible secrets. The night arrived, charged with an electric tension that seemed to echo the storm approaching from the ocean. Helena was on her bedroom balcony, watching distant lightning when she heard the first muffled groans coming from upstairs. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then came a scream, low, guttural, filled with an agony that made her completely forget the coldness between them. Without thinking twice, she ran to Daniel's room. She found him in bed, sweating and writhing, trapped in a nightmare more real than reality itself. His hands clutched the sheets so tightly that his knuckles were white. "No, Dad, no," he mumbled, his voice broken in a way Helena never imagined possible from that usually controlled man. "I tried to save the money. I'm sorry." Helena approached hesitantly. "Daniel." He didn't respond, lost in whatever horror his subconscious was reliving. Tears streamed down his face, and Helena felt something inside her chest tighten at the sight of such raw vulnerability. "Daniel, wake up," she whispered, gently touching his shoulder. He woke violently, grabbing her wrist with enough force to leave marks, his eyes wild and disoriented. For a moment, he didn't seem to recognize her, and Helena saw genuine terror in his eyes. "It's me," she said softly. "Helena, you were having a nightmare." Slowly, recognition returned to his gaze, but the shame that followed was almost worse than the terror. He released her wrist immediately, running his trembling hands over his sweaty face. "You shouldn't be here," he said, but his voice was stripped of its usual arrogance. "You were screaming." Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his shoulders hunched in a way that made him look decades older. "That's none of your concern." But this time, Helena didn't let herself be intimidated. She had seen something real, human, behind the mask he always wore. "When was the last time someone cared if you were hurting?" The question caught him off guard. He looked up at her, and Helena saw unshed tears glistening there. "You don't understand," he murmured. "I'm responsible. I convinced my father to make that investment. I was young, arrogant, thought I understood business." His voice broke. "When we discovered it was a fraud, when we lost everything, he couldn't take it. Massive heart attack 3 days later." Helena sat beside him on the bed, maintaining a respectful but comforting distance. "How old were you?" 22. He laughed bitterly. "Thought I knew everything, that I could make our family rich overnight. You were just a kid trying to impress his father, a kid who killed his own father out of greed." "Daniel, no." Helena turned to face him completely. "The one who did that was the one who orchestrated the fraud, not you. It was my signature on the contract, my insistence when he hesitated." Daniel closed his eyes, as if he could block out the memories. In his last moments in the hospital, do you know what he said? "Forgive your father for not being strong enough for you." The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of the rain that had finally begun to fall. Helena felt tears sting her own eyes. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his face, wiping away a tear that had escaped. "That's why you want revenge on Robert Knight," she said softly. Not a question. Daniel didn't pull away from her touch. "Robert Knight didn't just steal our money. He stole my father's life, my innocence, my ability to trust." He opened his eyes and looked at her. "And I planned to do the same thing to you." "Planned?" "I was going to corrupt you, use you to destroy your family from within, make you fall in love with me, and then break your heart when you discovered the truth." He ran a hand through his hair. "But now you're pregnant and I—" "You what?" Daniel was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I can't stop imagining what it would be like if the baby were mine." The words hung in the air between them, laden with a confession neither of them expected. Helena felt her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Daniel. Before she could finish the sentence, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't the calculated kiss of a man executing a revenge plan, but the desperate kiss of someone who had been alone for too long. Helena should have pulled away, should have remembered all the reasons why this was a bad idea. But instead, she found herself responding, her hands tangling in his hair. When they finally separated, both were breathless. This shouldn't have happened, Daniel murmured against her forehead. No, Helena agreed, but didn't pull away. They stayed like that, so close they could feel each other's breath, each fighting against feelings that shouldn't exist. The rain outside intensified, and Helena realized that something fundamental had changed between them that night. Stay, Daniel whispered. Just until I fall asleep. I can't. The nightmares come back. Helena knew she should refuse, knew that staying was dangerous for both of them. But there was something in his vulnerability that echoed her own loneliness. She nodded and lay beside him, keeping a careful distance. Daniel fell asleep with his head almost touching her shoulder, breath finally calm and regular. Helena stayed awake for hours, watching the man who was supposed to be her enemy sleep with an almost childlike expression while she felt the baby stir gently inside her. She didn't know that, outside the house, a figure in the rain was photographing the illuminated bedroom window, capturing evidence of an intimacy that could destroy both of them. Nor did she know that Miguel Santos, Daniel's attorney, had discovered her pregnancy even before his boss, and had already begun investigating the identity of the child's true father. That night, in the shared solitude of two wounded people, Helena and Daniel had crossed a line they could no longer undo. And someone was watching their every step towards a fall that could be fatal for them both. The next morning brought more than just the golden sun of the Hamptons. Helena woke up alone in Daniel's bed, the smell of the coffee he was brewing drifting into the room. There was a note on the pillow. Thanks for staying. D. Coming downstairs, she found him in the kitchen, already impeccably dressed for the day, as if the vulnerability of the night before had never existed. But when their eyes met, there was something different there, a careful tenderness he tried to hide behind the mask of control. How are you feeling? He asked, serving her tea instead of coffee, a small gesture that didn't go unnoticed. Better. And you? Slept better than in years. He hesitated, then approached and gently touched her face. Helena, about last night. You don't need to explain anything. I do, actually. Daniel took a deep breath. You showed me a kindness I don't deserve, and that changes things between us. Before Helena could reply, Daniel's cell phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. Miguel, what time is it in New York? His expression changed drastically as he listened. What? What do you mean, photographs? A long pause. No, don't go back to Chicago yet. Stay in the Hamptons. I need to resolve this first. He hung up, his face dark. What happened? Helena asked, sensing trouble. Someone photographed us last night. My bedroom window, you going in, only leaving this morning. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. The photos are already in the hands of some journalists in New York and Chicago. Helena felt her blood run cold. It means our marriage of convenience just became real in the eyes of the press, and it means you're in danger. The phone rang again. This time it was the house landline. Daniel answered with a sharp, hello. Daniel Volkov? The voice on the other end was honeyed, dangerous. I imagine you already know about the photographs. Who is this? Someone who knows all your secrets, dear son-in-law, including the fact that your lovely wife is pregnant with another man's child. Helena saw Daniel go pale. He covered the receiver and whispered to her, go to your room now. But Helena didn't move. She needed to hear this. What do you want? Daniel asked on the call. A conversation. Tonight at the New York Yacht Club. Alone. The voice chuckled. "Doom. Because if you don't come, tomorrow every major newspaper nationwide will know not only that your wife cheated on you before the wedding, but also some fascinating details about how you seduced the daughter of the man who supposedly robbed you. New York society loves a good revenge story, especially when it involves a secret pregnancy." Son of a bitch. "See you soon, Daniel, and bring your checkbook. You'll need it." The call ended. Daniel stood motionless for a long moment, holding the phone as if it were a weapon. "Daniel?" Helena approached him. "Who was that? Someone who can destroy both of us." He stared at her with an intensity that frightened her. "Helena, I need you to tell me everything about Lucas. Everything." "Why? What's the difference?" "Because whoever this person is, they know about him. They know about you two, and they're using it against us." Helena sat heavily in a chair. "Lucas was the son of a prominent family from New York, the Montgomerys, a traditional conservative family." She took a deep breath. "We dated in secret for 2 years because his family would never approve of a night, especially after we lost everything." "How did he die?" "An accident on the I-95, leaving a party. He was on his way back from a meeting where he was going to tell his parents about us, about the baby." Tears began to stream down her face. "He was going to take responsibility for everything, face his family, but he never made it home." Daniel remained silent, processing. "Helena, are you sure it was an accident? What do you mean? Powerful families, inconvenient children, secrets that can ruin reputations." Daniel began to pace the kitchen. "It might not have been an accident." Helena's cell phone rang. Unknown number. "Answer it," Daniel ordered. "On speaker." "Helena Knight Volkov?" The same honeyed voice from the previous call. "Or should I say, Helena Knight, single mother?" "Who are you?" Helena managed to say. "Someone who knew Lucas Montgomery very well, and who knows that his death wasn't exactly accidental." Helena almost dropped the phone. That's not true. "You see, darling,
Oh, but it
young
is.
Lucas discovered some inconvenient things about certain financial transactions involving your family and the Volkov family. Transactions that some very powerful people preferred to keep secret." The voice paused dramatically. "He was about to reveal everything. What a shame he lost control of the car on that curve." Daniel snatched the phone. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm the person who orchestrated the fall of the Knight family, and the person who killed the father of the baby your wife is carrying. And now..." A cold laugh. "I'm the person who's going to destroy both of you unless you do exactly what I tell you." "What do you want?" Daniel repeated, but his voice was different now. There was fear there. "First, I want you two to come to New York, today. Second, I want $50 million transferred to an account I'll email you. Third," the voice became even more sinister, "I want Helena Knight to prepare to be a very young widow. Because after I'm done using both of you, Daniel Volkov's fate will be exactly the same as what was reserved for poor Lucas." The call ended, leaving them in absolute silence. Helena looked at Daniel and saw her own terror reflected in his eyes. "He killed Lucas, and now he's going to kill you." Daniel pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since they met, Helena felt they were on the same side of a war they hadn't even known was being waged. "I won't let anything happen to you or the baby," he murmured against her hair. "And I won't let anything happen to you," she replied, surprising both of them with the determination in her voice. But as they embraced in the sunny kitchen, neither knew that the real game had just begun, and that the enemy they faced had roots far deeper in their families than either of them could imagine. The phone rang again. This time, it was a message. "Have a good trip back to New York. I look forward to our reunion, brother-in-law." Helena looked at Daniel. "Brother-in-law? My half-brother," Daniel said, his voice laden with an ancient bitterness. "Marcelo Volkov. I thought he had died in the same accident that..." Apparently, I was wrong about a lot of things. The drive back to New York was a silent nightmare. Daniel drove with white knuckles on the steering wheel, while Helena watched the landscape pass by the window, a protective hand over her belly. Both knew they were driving straight into a trap, but there was no choice. "Tell me about Marcelo," Helena said when they were nearing the city. "Half-brother on my father's side, 5 years older than me." Daniel took a deep breath. "When our parents married, he never accepted it. He always thought I was responsible for his father leaving his first family." "And were you close?" "For a while, yes. Until I convinced our father to make that cursed investment." Daniel's voice grew bitter. "Actually, the original idea was his, but when everything went wrong, he disappeared. I thought he had died in the same accident that killed our stepmother the following year." Helena felt a chill. "What accident? A hit and run?" "She was leaving the hospital after visiting my father." Daniel stopped in traffic and looked at her. "Now I'm starting to realize that maybe wasn't an accident either." The New York Yacht Club was practically empty when they arrived that evening. Daniel asked Helena to stay in the car, but she refused. "I'm not letting you face this alone. Helena, if something goes wrong, we need to be together." They found Marcelo on the main veranda, sipping whiskey while observing New York Harbor. He was an elegant man in his early 40s, with features similar to Daniel's, but with something dark in his eyes that set him completely apart. "My dear little brother." Marcelo stood up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And the beautiful Helena. My congratulations on the marriage and the pregnancy." "Marcelo," Daniel said dryly, "you're not dead. As you can see, rumors of my death were greatly exaggerated." Marcelo chuckled. "In fact, I've had very busy years building an empire of my own. You're not the only Volkov with a talent for business. What do you want?" "Justice." Marcelo approached, and Helena noticed how Daniel instinctively placed himself in front of her. "You destroyed our family, Daniel. Because of your greed, our father died. Our stepmother died, and I had to fake my own death to escape the ruin you caused." "I didn't cause anything. It was Robert Knight who—" "Robert Knight was just a pawn," Marcelo exploded. "I orchestrated that entire fraud, my dear brother. I wanted you to crash and burn, and you spectacularly crashed and burned." The silence that followed was deafening. Helena felt the world spin around her. You killed our father?" Daniel whispered. "I executed a weak man who chose you over me." Marcelo calmly sat back down. "And when I discovered you had survived and built this entire empire in pursuit of revenge against the innocent Robert Knight, well, I couldn't resist letting you get so close to your justice, only to then destroy everything." Helena stepped forward. "And Lucas? Why did you kill Lucas?" "Ah, the romantic young man." Marcelo smiled cruelly. "He discovered connections between our family and his. He was about to reveal that the money I used to destroy the Volkovs originally came from Montgomery family funds. I couldn't allow that." "You're a monster," Helena whispered. "I'm an efficient businessman." Marcelo stood up again. "And now, I'm going to finish what I started." "Daniel, you will transfer all your assets to me, or tomorrow all the major American press will know not only that your wife cheated on you, but that you married her knowing she was pregnant in a farce to get revenge on an innocent family. And if I do that? Oh, but you have no choice. Because if you don't," Marcelo took an envelope from his jacket, "these very compromising photographs of you two in the Hamptons will circulate not only in the press, but also reach the Montgomery family. Imagine how they'll react upon discovering that the woman who was pregnant with Lucas married another man just 3 months after their son's death." Helena felt her legs give way. "They don't know about the baby." "Not yet, but they will, and they'll want custody of the child. After all, it's all that's left of the Montgomery heir." Marcelo smiled maliciously. "Unless, of course, a tragic accident happens to the mother during childbirth." Daniel lunged at Marcelo, but stopped when he saw that Marcelo had drawn a gun. "Tsk, tisk, violence won't solve anything, little brother." Marcelo kept the gun low, but visible. You have 24 hours to decide. Either you transfer everything to me and disappear from the country, or I destroy you in ways you can't even imagine. There's a third option, Daniel said, his voice dangerously low. What? I kill you with my own hands. Marcelo laughed. With what army? Do you think I'm doing this alone? He signaled, and 3 men emerged from the club's shadows. Security, dear brother. I learned from the best. It was then that Helena realized they were in a no-win situation. Marcelo had planned every detail, every contingency. No, she said suddenly, we're not doing this. Both men looked at her in surprise. Helena, Daniel began. No. She lifted her chin with a determination that surprised even herself. I'm not going to live on the run. I'm not going to raise my child in fear, and I'm not going to let you destroy any more families. How romantic, Marcelo said dryly. But irrelevant. Publish the photos, Helena said, looking directly at him. Tell the Montgomerys about the baby. Do whatever you want. Helena, no, Daniel murmured, understanding what she was doing. You underestimate how much I no longer care what people think of me, she continued, addressing Marcelo. I lost everything once. I can lose everything again, but I won't let you win. For a moment, Marcelo seemed genuinely surprised. Then his expression hardened. Too bad. I had hoped you'd be more reasonable. He gestured again to his men. Take her. Little brother can watch while we decide what to do with her. It was then that Daniel realized Helena had just signed her own death warrant to protect him, and that he was about to lose the only person who had ever truly cared for him, along with the child he had learned to love as his own. Marcelo's men approached, and Daniel knew the moment had come to choose between saving Helena and saving himself. The choice he made would change everything. Stop, he said, raising his hands. I'll make the transfer. Leave her alone. Helena looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and despair, knowing he had just sacrificed himself for her and the baby. Wise, Marcelo said. You have 1 hour. After that, he didn't need to finish the sentence. As they were escorted out of the club, Helena whispered to Daniel, I'm sorry I ruined your life. You saved my life, he replied softly, in every possible way. But both knew it might be too late for that to matter. Helena didn't sleep that night, while Daniel worked feverishly in his study, organizing the transfer that would destroy everything he had built. She stood on the balcony of his penthouse apartment in Manhattan, watching the city lights and thinking. There was something that didn't fit in Marcelo's story. Lucas was meticulous, especially when it came to money. If he had discovered suspicious financial connections, he would have documented everything, and Helena knew exactly where he kept his most important files. At 5 in the morning, she left a note for Daniel and slipped out quietly. She had a few hours before Marcelo expected the transfer and a single chance to find something that could save them. Lucas's old house on the outskirts of the city had been closed for months, but Helena still had the key he had given her shortly before he died. The Montgomery family had kept everything exactly as it was, unable to cope with the pain of loss. In his study, Helena rummaged through physical and digital files, looking for anything that could connect the Volkov, Knight, and Montgomery families. It was on Lucas's personal computer that she found a hidden folder titled "For Helena, in case of emergency." Inside were dozens of documents, contracts, bank records, and an audio recording that made her blood run cold. Lucas's voice echoed through the silent room. Helena, if you're hearing this, it's because something happened to me. I've discovered things about our family that have changed everything. The Montgomerys are not who they appear to be. Helena sat heavily in his chair, a hand over her belly. My uncle Marcelo. Yes, Marcelo Montgomery Volkov. He changed his surname years ago. He's alive, and he's behind a network of illicit financial schemes that have destroyed at least 15 families in the last 10 years, including the Volkovs and the Knights. Helena's world collapsed. Marcelo was Lucas's uncle. He uses shell corporations, forged documents, and when someone gets too close to the truth, Lucas paused. Helena, I'm scared. He found out I know everything. I'm going to confront him tonight at the Montgomery family party. If something goes wrong, you need to take this evidence to the police, and you need to protect our baby. The recording continued with Lucas detailing how Marcelo had infiltrated family businesses, gaining trust, and then orchestrating their destruction to buy their assets for a fraction of the value. The Knights had been just one of the victims of a much larger operation. He plans to take full control of the Montgomery family's businesses when my grandfather dies. With the other heirs dead or discredited, he will be the only one entitled to the inheritance. And Helena, Lucas's voice became urgent. If something happens to me, he'll come after you. Because you're carrying the only remaining legitimate Montgomery heir. Helena stopped the recording, her hands trembling. Marcelo didn't just want to destroy Daniel, he wanted her child. The baby she carried was the key to one of the largest fortunes in the country. Rapidly, she began copying all the files to a flash drive when she heard footsteps at the entrance of the house. Helena, I know you're in here. Marcelo's voice sent panic through her. He had discovered her whereabouts. I knew eventually you'd come here looking for your dead boyfriend's little trinkets, he said, casually ascending the stairs. Lucas was always so organized. I'm sure he left some inconvenient evidence. Helena finished copying the files and hid the flash drive inside her boot, then quickly deleted the originals from the computer. You killed your own nephew, she said when Marcelo appeared at the study door. I eliminated an obstacle to my plans, he corrected, just as I'll do with you if you don't hand over what you just copied. I don't know what you're talking about. Marcelo laughed. Helena, darling, do you really think I haven't had this place monitored for months? I saw everything you did on the computer through the cameras I installed, he signaled, and two of the same men from the previous night appeared behind him. Now I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. Give me this evidence, and I'll allow you and the baby to live. Refuse, and... He made a casual gesture. Accidents happen to pregnant women every day. Helena lifted her chin, thinking quickly. She needed to buy time and find a way to get out of there alive. You need me alive, she said, because when the baby is born, you'll need my signature to assume guardianship. And if I die now, Daniel inherits my rights as a husband. Marcelo's expression shifted slightly. Interesting. Go on. You haven't thoroughly researched U.S. inheritance laws, have you? Helena bluffed, praying her deduction was correct. If I die, Daniel automatically becomes the baby's legal guardian, and as the Montgomerys' son-in-law by extension, he would have rights to the inheritance as well. That can be circumvented. It can, but it would be easier to keep me alive and controlled. Helena took a step toward him, knowing she was playing a dangerous game, especially if I cooperate voluntarily. What are you proposing? A partnership. You stop threatening Daniel, and I help you consolidate control over the Montgomery inheritance when the baby is born. 50% for each of us. Marcelo studied her for a long moment. And in return, Daniel remains free to keep his businesses. The three of us share power instead of destroying each other. And why would I trust you? Helena took a deep breath. I married him for money, Daniel, just as you think. And because, she forced tears to her eyes, because I'm afraid of you, and fearful people make alliances with those in power. For a moment, Marcelo seemed to consider the proposal. Then he smiled. You know what? You almost convinced me. Almost. He stepped closer. But I made the mistake of underestimating one clever woman once. I won't make it again. He signaled his men. Take her and find that evidence. Turn the whole house upside down if you need to. It was then that Helena realized her time had run out. But as they grabbed her, she managed to discreetly start a call on her cell phone in her pocket, dialing Daniel. She only hoped he was paying attention. Daniel will realize I'm gone, she said as she was dragged out. Ah, my dear brother already knows where you are, Marcelo chuckled. I sent one of my men to deliver a very touching note saying you couldn't take the pressure and decided to kill yourself in the same place Lucas died. How romantic, don't you think? Helena felt despair wash over her. Daniel would think she had given up, that she had abandoned him when he needed her most. But as she was led out of the house, she heard the distant sound of sirens approaching. Someone had called the police. The question was, would they arrive in time? Daniel didn't believe the note for a second. Helena would never give up like that, especially not at the place where Lucas had died. She was too strong, too determined. And when he saw the ongoing call on her cell phone, with the muffled sounds of an argument, he knew she was in danger. He immediately called Miguel Santos, who had remained loyal despite everything, and the private investigator he kept on retainer. I need you at the Montgomery house, on the outskirts of the city now, and call the police. The race to the outskirts was desperate. Daniel drove like a man possessed, knowing that every second could mean the difference between saving Helena and losing her forever. The woman who had become much more than a wife of convenience, the woman he had discovered he was capable of loving. He arrived just before the police, finding the house appeared empty. But Marcelo's cars were still in the garage, and Daniel knew his half-brother was there somewhere. It was the sound of an argument coming from the back of the house that guided him. Marcelo had Helena on the old pier, where Lucas used to dock his yacht. The gun pointed at her, while his henchmen frantically searched her pockets. "Where are the files?" Marcelo shouted. "I know you copied them." "I already told you I don't know what you're talking about," Helena replied, even as her voice trembled with fear. Daniel approached silently through the trees, calculating the distance. 3 armed men, Helena as a hostage. He needed a distraction. It was then that he saw Miguel arriving from the other side of the property with 2 police officers. Daniel signaled silently, coordinating a simultaneous approach. "Last chance, Helena," Marcelo said, cocking the gun. "The files or your life." "Even if I had them, you'd kill me anyway," she replied with a courage that made Daniel's heart clench. "At least this way, Daniel will be free." But Daniel won't be free, because when you die, he'll be considered a suspect in his own wife's murder. And when I present evidence that he discovered the betrayal and the pregnancy, Marcelo smiled cruelly. "Well, crimes of passion are so common, aren't they?" It was then that Daniel couldn't wait any longer. "Marcelo!" His half-brother turned, momentarily distracted, and that was all the police needed. Gunshots echoed simultaneously. The officers aiming at Marcelo's henchmen, Daniel lunging at his own brother. The fight was brutal and swift. Years of suppressed rage exploded as Daniel finally had Marcelo under his fists, but it was Helena who stopped him. "Daniel, stop, it's over." He turned to her, seeing tears of relief streaming down her face. Marcelo was unconscious beneath him, the gun far from his reach, the henchman handcuffed by the officers. Daniel ran to Helena, pulling her into his arms with a force that almost lifted her off the ground. "I thought I'd lost you. I thought—" "I'm here," she whispered against his chest. "We're here." It was only then that Daniel realized she had said "we," and his hand instinctively went to her belly, protecting the life growing inside. "The baby is okay? We're okay. All of us." In the days that followed, the truth finally came to light. The files Helena had copied were enough not only to incriminate Marcelo for multiple frauds and 2 murders, but also to clear the Knight family's name. Robert had been just another victim, not the perpetrator Daniel had believed him to be for so many years. 15 years, Daniel said, sitting on the balcony of the temporary apartment they had rented in Manhattan while deciding where to live. 15 years, hating the wrong man. Helena was beside him, watching the city lights. Sometimes hatred blinds us to the truth. But love, she laced her fingers in his. Love makes us see clearly. "Helena," Daniel turned to face her completely. "I need you to know that everything has changed for me. You changed everything. I love you, and I love this baby as if it were my own." "It is yours," she said softly. Maybe not by blood, but by choice, by love. And I love you too, Daniel. This wasn't what I planned when I agreed to marry you, but sometimes the heart makes better plans than the mind. 6 months later, at a reputable hospital in Manhattan, Daniel held his daughter in his arms for the first time. Maria Helena Volkov had entered the world with her mother's green eyes and a fierce determination that reminded them of both parents. "She's perfect," Daniel murmured, tears streaming down his face without any attempt to hide them. "She's ours," Helena said, watching the man who had truly become her husband, not just on paper. The Knight family was completely rehabilitated, their debts cleared with the money recovered from Marcello's frauds. Robert, finally knowing the truth about what had happened to his company, wept as he asked Daniel for forgiveness for crimes he had never committed. Daniel, in turn, asked for forgiveness for years of misdirected hatred and for the revenge that almost destroyed 2 innocent families. Marcello was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the murders of Lucas and Daniel's stepmother, in addition to the multiple frauds. At the sentencing hearing, he looked at Daniel one last time and said, "You were always the favorite anyway." "No," Daniel replied, Helena by his side holding Maria in her arms. "I just learned to love instead of hate. That's the difference between us." A year later, they renewed their vows in a proper ceremony on the Hamptons beach, where everything had begun to change between them. This time, the words "I do" were spoken with tears of joy and hearts completely surrendered. Robert walked Helena down the aisle, whispering, "Forgive an old father for almost giving you to the wrong man for the wrong reasons." "Dad," Helena smiled. "Sometimes the wrong reasons lead to the right people, and sometimes love is born even from the ashes of revenge." Daniel waited for her at the altar, no longer the cold, calculating man who had married her for revenge, but a man transformed by the redemptive power of true love. Beside him, Maria slept peacefully in her grandmother Beatrice's arms, oblivious to the fact that she was the center around which a new family had formed. When they kissed as husband and wife for the second time, there were no contracts or conveniences between them. There was only love, imperfect, complicated, born of pain and forgiveness, but true. And on the Hamptons beach, where their wounded souls had first recognized each other, Daniel and Helena officially began the life they had chosen to build together, proving that even in the most improbable marriages, love can flourish and transform not just 2 hearts, but the destiny of entire families. Daniel's empire became a family legacy, built no longer on vengeance, but on love, honor, and second chances. And when Maria was old enough to ask how her parents met, they told her the truth, that sometimes the strongest love is born from the most impossible beginnings, and that every family deserves a chance at redemption. Years later, when Daniel awoke in the morning and saw Helena beside him, with Maria sleeping between them after a nightmare, he still marveled at the miracle of having found his family in the most improbable circumstances. The man who had planned to destroy a family had ended up creating a new one, stronger and more loving than anything he could have imagined. And Helena, watching her husband play with their daughter in the garden of their beautiful home in a picturesque New York suburb, knew that she had made the right decision that night in the Hamptons when she chose to stay and fight for the man behind the mask of coldness. Some loves, she learned, were worth all the battles one had to face to win them. Their love hadn't sprung from a fairy tale, but from difficult choices, forgiveness, and the courage to believe that 2 wounded people could heal together. And perhaps that was the most beautiful love story of all. The one that proves it's never too late to start over, to forgive, and to discover that the human heart has an infinite capacity to love, even after being broken.